Okay, today's daf is
Geht nuven, sag geht nuven.
yes, get moving, but jetzt ungeheuben.
Ja,
Yeah.
dann, ich hat mich auf.
Okay.
So I start again.
Yeah, okay. Baruch Hashem.
Hashem.
I get the oven.
Nuven, sag geht nuven.
Okay, my halt Sotah Daf Lamed Gimel. I just going to start off. I just wanted to mention from yesterday, and so because it comes up again today, and we're going to just didn't see it clearly. There are two mountains. It's the mountains where the Jewish people, when they entered and they crossed the Jordan River, they crossed the Jordan River and they went straight to Mount Abel and Mount Gerizim, and they accepted upon themselves the bris, the covenant of accepting that they'll uphold the Torah and different parts of the Torah, as mentioned in the curses. We'll just point it. And then everybody took upon themselves that they will uphold the Torah. What's interesting is that the mountain Abel, where they turned and said the curses on, this is Mount Abel today, as you can see in the screen. I don't know if it means anything to you. And Har Gerizim is something more, a little bit greener. This is from Wikipedia. But I found fascinating is that they found on Har Abel a Mizbeach from Yeshua's time. And they also found the most significant archaeological stone. That's a little clay tablet which has Hebrew lettering saying Orur in a different type of Hebrew script, which we're not familiar with, but was a Hebrew script that was used back then. So if this is true, then this is the oldest written Hebrew words that has been discovered, and it's from 1400 BC, before Common Era, when Yeshua crossed the Jordan. So it's a fascinating topic, the discussion of the curses and the blessings, but we'll get more to it later on today in today's daf. Okay, so we are daf Lamed Gimel, but we're going to start from daf Lamed Beis, about like 10 lines from the bottom. Kriya Shema. Okay, so then we learned in the Mishnah that many things that could be said in any language. So one of the things is Kriya Shema, accepting upon yourself the Ol Malchus Shemayim, which means the yoke of heaven. Basically, you're accepting that things are the way they are. That's called Ol Malchus Shemayim, and it's specifically designed for your life and for your neshama. So Kriya Shema. So how do you know, Minolan? How do you know that you can read the Kriya Shema in any language that you want? Iksiv, because the pasuk says Shema Yisrael, listen, Jewish people. And so Bechol Loshen Shata Shemeya, and Shema could also mean understand. Think about it deeply and understand it. So in any language that you understand, you could read the Kriya Shema. That's how we know. So now the Gemara gives you, we had this machlokes when we learned Be'ez Hashem, Masechta Brachos, Masechta Gila. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. We're in Lamed Beis, 10 lines from the bottom. Kriya Shema kichsava. You have to read the Kriya Shema as it's written in the Torah in Hebrew. Divrei Rebbe. So said Rebbe. Chachamim says Bechol Lashon. You could say it in any language. So my time at the Rebbe, why did the Rebbe say that you have to only read it in Hebrew? And says the Gemara, Amakra, because the pasuk says Vahayu. You have Vahayu Advarim. It has to be these are the words. Vahaviyasin Yehu. It has to be in the exact format that's written in the Torah. So in order to be mekayim the mitzvah of reading Kriya Shema b'shach b'chav kumecha during the morning and night and then during the morning, it has to be written in Hebrew. So says Rebbe. Rabbanan, what are Rabbanan? How do they know that you could read you could say it in any language that you want? Amakra, because the pasuk says Shema, listen. B'chol loshen shata shemeya. In any language that you can listen and understand, you could read the Kriya Shema. So now the Gemara asks back and forth. Rabbanan name, but Rabbanan, what do they do with haksiv v'hayu? Doesn't the pasuk v'hayu, it should be as written, implies that you should only be able to read the Kriya Shema in Hebrew? And since the Gemara, that pasuk that says v'hayu, you have to read it in this format. It teaches you a different halacha. What's the halacha it teaches you? Shlo yikra ena l'mafreya, that you should not read it backwards. Not take one pasuk and then say and read backwards the next pasuk, etc., etc. Even though you're saying complete verses, But the Hayu teaches you should not read it backwards. It says the Gemara of Rebbe. How does Rebbe know the idea that you can't read the Kriya Shema backwards? From where does he know it from? So the Gemara answers nafkele midvarim, from the words the words hadvarim. So since it adds an extra hey, it means not only devarim, you have to use the exact language that to read the Kriya Shema that's written here, but it's hadvarim in the same order. That's in the same order that it's written here. So that's how Rebbe knows you cannot read the Kriya Shema backwards. V'rabbanim, what are Rabbanim? There's an extra hey there of hadvarim. What do they do with the extra hey? The Rabbanim is devarim hadvarim loy mashmalhu. The Rabbanim don't need to darshan the extra hey. Sometimes and just semantics, the Torah will put in an extra hey, but there's no drasha or any halacha learned from that. That's what the Gemara just said. Now the Gemara now goes in the reverse. Rebbe nami haksiv shema, but according to Rebbe it says shema, and therefore it teaches you according to Rebbe. Doesn't it mean that you can read it in any language that you can hear? And says the Gemara hoba bailate. And that's what we learned from that Shema. You have to hear in your ears whatever comes out in your mouth. In other words, it's not enough to say it in such a low whisper that you can't hear yourself. You have to hear it, whatever comes out of your mouth. So you have to really make a sound out of your mouth so that your ears can hear it. That's the only way you can be Yotze the Krishma. So the Gemara asks, how did the Rabbanan know that idea? Rabbanan savri late. Rabbanan will hold. Command Omar, according to the opinion, Akari Shema. If you read the Shema, and your ears don't hear it, right? You know you're moving your mouth, but your ears are not hearing what's coming out of your mouth. Yotze, you fulfill your obligation. So Rabbanan don't need that Shema to teach you. You have to hear it. You learn that you could read the Kriya Shema in any language. The Gemara asks, Lema Kasava Rebbe. Let us say that Rebbe holds, we go to Lama Gimel Al Ma'alef, Kol HaTorah B'chol HaLoshen Hemra, that the entire Torah can be read in any language. Rashi says it means that the Torah that you read on Shabbos in the shuls can be read in any language. Why? And Rashi says, or it could mean, let's say, the way Tosfos learns, that it means that any time that you have to read something from the Torah, for example, Chalitza or Vidu Meiser, things that need to be verbalized from the Torah, can be said in any language. That's the default. The Isal, because if you were to hold Bil Shain Kodesh Nemra, that the default always is that you have to say it where in Hebrew, right? If that's the default, then the question is, why do we need an extra pasuk over here? V'hayu d'kasav rachmana lamali. Why does the Torah have to write v'hayu that you could read over here? And Kriya Shema has to be in Hebrew. Every time you read from the Torah, it has to be in Hebrew. So would you say that Rebbe holds that the Chol HaTorah Kula can be said in any language? And says the Gemara, no, Itzrach. I needed to offset. V'hayu needs to offset something. Really, the Chol HaTorah Kula has to be read in Hebrew. And the Torah did not have to write that Shema should be said in Hebrew. Whenever you're reading from the Torah, it has to be read in Hebrew. But Simdik says Shema. The Torah had to write Shema. And to teach you another halacha that you have to hear what comes out of your mouth, so it had to write Shema. So, but you might interpret the Shema to mean that, like the Rabbanan said, that you could read it in any language. That's why, to offset that misinterpretation, that's why the Torah emphasized over here, according to Rebbe, that it has to be read in Hebrew. Now the Gemara asks one final question. Let us say that Rabbanan hold, anytime you're supposed to express something from the Torah, reading in shul, or saying, let's say the Chalitza lady saying all the verbal stuff that she's supposed to say, she can say it in Hebrew. She must say it in Hebrew, and that's the default, because the Isal Kadaitich B'chol Lashin, if you think that according to Rabbanan, Kol HaTorah Kula can be said in any language, Shema d'kasav rachmana lamali. Why did the Torah write Shema by Kriya Shema to teach you that Shema could be read in any language? But if the default was that Kol HaTorah Kula is in any language, you don't need the Shema to teach you that Kriya Shema could be read in any language. So it must be that the Rabbanan hold that Kol HaTorah Kula must be said in Hebrew. And therefore, Shema teaches you that Kriya Shema can be read in any language. So the Gemara answers, not so. You don't have a proof. Itzrach. We need it, Mishum de Ksiva Hoyel. Because really, Kol HaTorah Kula is supposed to be written in any language. And the Chachamim would not need the pasuk of Shema to teach you that Kriya Shema could be read in any language. Without the pasuk, I would know Kriya Shema could be read in any language. But since the Torah wrote V'hayu, and that teaches you a halacha of what? That V'hayu, that it has to be read in order. And I might have misinterpreted that V'hayu to teach you what Rebbe teaches you, that it has to be read in Hebrew. To offset that mistake, the Torah wrote Shema, that Kriya Shema can be read in any language. But the default could be that anything that you read from the Torah can be read in any language. Okay, the Mishnah also said that tefillah, prayer, could be said in any language. What's the proof? What's the source of that? So you don't really need a source. Rachmehi. Tefillah is asking God for mercy. Kol heicha d'bayil matzli, and any way you can do it. You could pray for it, even without in any language which you feel comfortable that you could express yourself in asking mercy from God. And furthermore, when the Torah gives you an obligation to pray, the Torah says, you have to serve God with all your heart. And heart, it implies that even tefillah is mostly about the heart, not so much even expressing the mouth. So therefore, it does not necessarily have to be in Hebrew. So the Gemara asks, are you telling me that the prayer can be in any language? That would be great. But Rabbi Yehuda said, a person shouldn't pray and ask for his needs, let's say Daven Shem Nesrei, in Aramaic, like the Gemara language that we're using, which is a quasi-Hebrew. Why? The Rabbi Yochanan said, we can't formulate the prayers in Hebrew. If you make a prayer in the Aramaic language, you will not get help from the angels. In other words, you always need assistance from the angel to take your prayer and bring it before God. And if you express yourself in the language of Arami, which is near Hebrew, the Malachim don't like it. Why? So the Gemara says, the Malach angels don't recognize the Arami language. Since it's like a yeshivish English, so to speak. It's not a pure Hebrew. It's an offset of Hebrew English. So therefore, the Malachim don't feel that is a nice language to bring before God. So they're not going to help you bring your prayer before God, and certainly in any other language. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda said, it seems to imply that Rabbi Yehuda said that your best prayer is only in Hebrew. So how could our Mishnah say you can pray in any language? Answers the Gemara, like Kasha, our Mishnah is not difficult. Our Mishnah is talking about ha b'yachid. That Rabbi Yehuda is talking about when you're praying alone, then you can daven and you must daven in only Hebrew. But our Mishnah is talking about b'tzibor, with a tzibor. When you're davening in a quorum with a minyan, so then you don't have to daven in Hebrew, you can daven in any language. And because God you don't need the malachim to help you when you have a tzibor davening. When you're davening with a minyan, automatically the prayer goes up without the assistance of malachim, and therefore you can say it in any language. So technically, again, like we spoke this out, you could probably pray in any language. They could have set up every shul to have a prayer book in any language. But the answer is Hebrew has a certain benefit for it. The words themselves are more precise, and it's very hard to translate. And even without understanding Hebrew, somehow there's a magic and power to that prayer. But from the technical source of the halacha, in its tzibur, you could daven in any language. It doesn't have to be in Hebrew. So now the Gemara asks, the ein malachi asharis makirim b'lashon Arami, do malachim not recognize the Aramaic, the Gemara language? I mean, they don't discuss it. They don't even talk it. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Yochanan Kohen Gadol Shama Baskol Mi Beis Kodesh HaKodashim. Yochanan Kohen Gadol went into the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, and heard it probably on Yom Kippur. He heard it on Yom Kippur, and he heard this voice from heaven, which was a malach telling him, Shu Oime Nitzchetalia the Ozla Gacha, the young Kahanim who went to war, like the Hashmonaim that went to war against the Greeks, Krova la Antiochia, they went to war next to Antiochia, and they won the war. And so they went to war on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the radios weren't open, so they were all interested to know what's going on. Are the Hashmonaim winning the war? And he went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur and heard the story that they were telling him, a Baskel telling him that the Yom Kahanim are winning the war. So we see, and they said it in Aramaic. That's the point. So we see the Malachim do speak Aramaic. V'shuv Masa, there's another story by Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik is the last of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, of the last of the 120 great men of assembly, and we never replaced that. It was just attrition. Everybody who died was not replaced. And he was a Kohen Gadol, Sheshama Baskol, Mebeis Kodesh Kodashim. He heard a Baskol during the second base of Migdash, and he heard a voice from heaven, that says, "Betelis avidide the amasnea la soya." The plans of this enemy that wanted to come and destroy the base of Migdash was nullified. The Nehereg Gaskalgos, this king called Gascalius, I think Caligula was killed. Ubatlik Zerasoiv, and his edicts were nullified. So he heard that somebody, a great king, died who was attempting to overrun the second base of Migdash, and he heard it. This Pascal Amalach he heard it inside the base Kaddish Kadashim. The Kosovo Ois he wrote it down at that hour. He said, "What time did I hear it?" Let's say he heard it at 11 o'clock in the morning when he was doing the service in the Kaddish Kadashim. The Chivnu, and it turned out to be exactly correct. When they found out when was Gaskalgos killed, it was exactly at 11 o'clock. But anyway, he got this message told over to him in the Kodesh Kodashim in Aramaic, probably by a malach who related it to him. So how could you say malachim don't speak and don't like this language, Aramaic? We see they're speaking Aramaic. Uvul Russian Arami, we see they speaking a Lashon Arami. Answers the Gemara, if you want, I can tell you. Baskol Sha'ani, the La'ashmu'e Avida. There's a malach called the Baskol malach. He's just a newsman. And basically, since he's just relaying the news, he can relay it in any language. So it's not like the language of the malachim is Aramaic. It's just he's expressing what normal people talk. So this is the exceptional malach that can speak Aramaic. Most malachim do not speak Aramaic. The Iba is saying, it's not that they don't understand the language, but they hold it's inferior because it's not a pure Hebrew. The Iba is saying, if you want, I could tell you, Gabriel Hava. Actually, I could tell you the name of that malach. The name of the malach that appeared in the Kodesh Kodashim name was Gabriel, the Amama, and Gabriel is the only malach that really is very an expert in languages, because we learned previously that Ba Gabriel v'limdei shivim lashon. Gabriel came to Yosef in prison and taught him how to speak 70 languages. So therefore, it was Gabriel. So that was just an exceptional malach that spoke Aramaic. But generally, the malachim that are assisting, helping your prayers rise up to heaven, those malachim don't like when you say your prayer in Hebrew, and they will not assist you. The Mishnah said, Birkas Hamazon, when you're benching, it does not have to necessarily be in Hebrew. The Ksiv, because the pasuk says, V'chalta v'savato v'rachta, you should eat, be satiated, and bless. And bless doesn't specifically say how you should bless. Any language that you want to bless God, that's acceptable. Shvuas ha'edus, as we said in the Mishnah, means that if someone wants you to say testimony for him on his behalf in court, and you swore that you're going to, but then you don't show up and you don't do it, so then the one that made you take the oath said it in any language, and you accepted that oath, then you have to bring this carbon oil of Yared, and there's a big punishment there. So how do you know that the language that you can take the oath can be in any language? The Ksiv, the pasuk says, if a person sins, v'shama kol ola, and he understood, he heard somebody who gave him an oath, and he answered Amen. So v'shama means he understood. He heard that the person gave it to him and made him take the oath in the language that he understood. So therefore we see that Shvuas Ha'edus can be said over, can be said over in any language. Then there's another type of shvuah hapigadin, the shvuah of the depositor. A man deposited something by his friend, and then he comes to his friend and says, give me back my deposit money I gave you. And the person says, you never gave me anything. So then the other person who wants his money back says, take an oath, that the following oath, and he says the oath, and the other person, the one that's supposed to watch the money, says amen. That oath that he's taking does not have to be, it can be in any language, does not have to be in Hebrew. How do you know that? We have Gzeir Shavah. It says the word sechta by shvuas hapigadai, and it says the word sechta by shvuas eidus, which you already established can be said in any language because of the pasuk v'shama. So therefore, shvuas hapigadai also can be, that oath can be taken in any language. Now the Mishnah says ve'elu nemarim b'lshon kodesh. The following must be said in lashon kodesh. So briefly, I wanted to just bring up on the psukim. There's this concept that we saw that when the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael, they went to the mountain of Avel and mountain of Grizim, and they said the brachas and klolis. So the pasuk says the following should be stood on Har Grizim, ba'over chemes yadim. You go to Har Grizim, which is right across the Jordan. We'll see what that means. But Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Yosef, Binyamin stood on Har Grizim, and Reuven, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Tali stood on the Klola mountain, which is called Har Avel. And the Levium said, first they said it in a blessing way, in a loud voice. Kol Ram says, Oro Ish, who does this, Oro Maklev or Aviv, or these are the covenants, and everybody had their answer, Amen. They said it in a blessing format, and they said it in a curse format. And that's and then the final one is Oro La Yakamas Divrei Torah Zos. Then the Chumash in Parshas Re'eh discusses that when you come into Eretz Yisrael, go to Har Grizim, the bracha should be in Har Grizim, and the klal should be on Har Avel. And the Torah tells you exactly where it is. And this is the pasuk that seems to indicate where it's located. But we will see in the Gemara that not everybody agrees on its location. So let's read the Gemara. The following can be read in any language. Mikra bikurim b'chalitza ad mikra. So the Gemara says mikra bikurim ketzad. How do you know that mikra bikurim, when you bring the gift to the Kohen with the basket of fruit, and you lift it up, and you have to express your hakaras hatov, the Torah gives you a whole language to say Arami Ovid Avi and Parshas Kisavai. How do you know it has to be written in Hebrew? Because the pasuk says V'nisa v'marta lifnei Hashem akecha. V'nisa means you lift your voice and say it before God. But later on it says V'anu halavim v'amru el kol yish Yisrael. There's a pasuk that says V'anu by the Levium, by the brachas and klolos. So there it says also the language V'anu. So we have Onisa and V'anu. Ma'aniya umura lahala b'lshon kodesh. Just like the aniya, the brachas and klolos had to be said in Hebrew. Afkan b'lashon kodesh. So also Mikra Bikurim also has to be said over in Lashon Kodesh. But how do you know Ulevi and Gufayim and all? This is the big question. How do you know the brachas and klolos had to be written, had to be expressed in Hebrew? Maybe they could have said it in Egyptian because most of the people probably spoke Egyptian. So how do you know that Yehoshua said authorized that they should say it only in Hebrew? The Gemara says Asi Kol Kol Mi Moshe. We have a Gzeir Shavah. Ksiv Hach, it says by the brachas and klolos, koil ram. They have to do it in a raised voice. Ksiv Hasam, it says by the Aseres Adibros, Moshe Daber v'Elikim Yanenu b'koil. Moshe spoke, and the Eibishter raised his voice. Ma'alahala and Bilshon Kodesh. You can't imagine that God's giving the Aseres Adibros in another language. It was given in Hebrew. So the Aseres Adibros, the Ten Commandments were given in Hebrew. Avkan, so also the Gzeir Shavah tells us that the brachas and klolos were also Bilshon Kodesh given over in Hebrew, and from hence we know Mikra Bikurim also had to be done in Hebrew because of the Gzeir Shavah Vanisa to the brachas and klolos. So now the Mishnah said Chalitza Ketzad. So the Gemara said, the Mishnah said that Chalitza, the language of Chalitza, that the woman said that this man doesn't want to do Yibam to me, and all that verbal expression that she has to say also has to be done in Hebrew. And the Gemara learned it because it says V'anisa. The Mishnah said that the Chachamim learned it because it said in V'anisa. Let's see in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said chalitza. Kate said va'ansa va'amra. She has to say it in a loud voice, and therefore it says va'anu halaviyim. So we have exeris shava, just like brachas and klolos were lashon kodesh. So also chalitza has to be written in lashon kodesh. Rabbi Yehuda said va'ansa va'amra kacha. There's another pasuk that says kacha that by chalitza acha toim b'lashon hazeh. That means you have to say it precisely. Rabbi Yehuda did not have that exeris shava. So now the Gemara just continues on and just evaluates Rabbi Yehuda's opinion and the Chachamim's opinion. So now the Gemara says in the bottom of the page, the Gemara says, "Rabbanim hai kocha mai avdele." Since the Rabbanim know that it has to be said in Hebrew from the Gezeres Shava, what do they do with the word kocha by chalitza, where it says kocha, which implies that's how Rabbi Yehuda learned that it has to be said in Hebrew. They teach you the davar shumai sama'akan. They teach you that what? That if you don't do the spitting, if the lady does not remove the shoe of the yavam, then there's no chalitza. That there's no expo factor will say it's good. That tells you koch. You have to do precisely what it says in the Chumash. Rabbi Yehuda says mikoi kocha. I could learn it from koi, and I have an extra kof to teach you the other thing that you must express yourself in Hebrew. Rabbanan koi kocha loy mashmalei. Rabbanan don't use the extra kof. It's just it's there, but it's for semantics. Therefore, they need the gzeres shava. Now the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda hai va'ansa va'amra. We go to Amabez. My avdelay. What does he do with the va'ansa va'amra? Why doesn't he have a gzeres shava? What does he do that with that ansa va'amra that it says by chalitza? So surprisingly enough, that teaches you that the brachas and klolos that were by the Levium, that was said in Lashon Kodesh. So va'ansa chalitza became the teacher to the brachas and klolos according to Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, why didn't you learn that the Levium have to be said in Hebrew the way the Rabbanan learned it? They have Exeir Shava. It says by Levium the word Kyle, and it says by the Aseres Dibros the word Kyle. So from here we learn that it could be said in Hebrew. So why didn't Rabbi Yehuda have that limud to teach you that the brachas and clauses were said in Hebrew? Rabbi Yehuda had this Exeir Shava of Ansa. So he learned answer of the Levium to the answer of Chalitza. But Kol he didn't have this Gezeres Shava, that there was a Gezeres Shava of the Birchas Levium to Aseres Adibras. He didn't have that tradition from his rabbis, and therefore he had to search for another source that the Brachas and Klolos was said in Hebrew. That's exactly what the Brisa says. Rabbi Yehuda has this opinion. Kol Mokim, anytime the Torah says Shnema Koi Kocha Aniya Amira, this language, koi, kocha, aniya, amira, when the Torah says that, it means strict. Eine el lashon kodesh. You must say it in Hebrew. For example, koi. By the Birchas Kahanim, it says koi savarchu. So now we know. Birchas Kahanim, the duchanin, can only be said by the Kahanim in Hebrew. Kocha, the chalitza. The Torah wrote kocha. It has to be precisely by chalitza. It has to be said over in Hebrew. Aniya va'amira, that word vanisa va'amarta that says by Levium, we have Exeres Shava to chalitza, that also means it has to be written in Hebrew. Now the Gemara just discusses, and we'll end soon with this, is where exactly is this location of Har Reason and Har Eva. The Brachas Clause Keitzah, Cave and Shavu Yisrael Siyardin, Tanur Rabban, the rabbis taught. The Pasuk, the Chumash gives you indications of where you're going to find Har Grizim and Har Eva. Tanur Rabban, the rabbis taught. First, it's crossed the Jordan, but right when you cross the Jordan, so very far away from the Jordan. So you have to really go into center Israel to find it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Achrei derech mavoy hashemesh. The Torah tells you it's very far from the coming of the sun. It's far from the east. Mokoim shacham zoyrachas, far from where the sun begins to shine. So if you look at the picture, so if this is east, if this is east, of course, the Mediterranean is the west. So you have to go further into Israel, far from the east. That's what it says. Then the Torah says, it's Be'eretz Knani Ayer Rava. It's the land where the Phoenicians live, there's flat lands over there. There's plain lands. The Sumerians lived there in the time the Gemara was written. The Sumerians lived there. And Mul HaGilgal, we learned Samach LaGilgal. It's next to, you can see the city of Gilgal from the mountaintops of Grizim and Avon. Eitzel Eloinim Mamre, next to this place called Eloinim Mamre, Eloini Mari means Shechem. It means next to the city of Shechem. How do you know that? The Torah doesn't say that Grizim and Har Abel were next to Shechem, but it says Eitzel Eloini Mari. But later another pasuk says, by Avram it says that Eloin Moira was next to the city of Shechem. Ma Eloin Moira, just by the Eloin Moira that's said by Avram Avinu is next to the city of Shechem. Afkan, so also Har Grizim and Har Abel is next to the city of Shechem. Hanya, we learned to write, so we don't. Rabbi Yosi agreed with that opinion, that somewhere next to the city of Shechem are two mountains. One's called Har Grizim, one's called Har Abel. The Dova says the Yafti Sifrei Kusim, and here I prove that the Kusim really forged their Torah. They put in the word because the real Torah does not say the word Shechem, and yet they agree that Har Grizim and Har Abel, the place where the Jews took the covenant, was on the mountains near Shechem. But the Kusim don't believe in Gzeira Shabbos. So how do they know? Amarti lehem ziyafta teresachem, you forged your Torah. Well, lesem yatkin klim, you didn't gain anything from it. Sha'atem oimrim, you agree. Eloin mamre and moire is Shechem. Eloin meire means Shechem. Afon imoidim shein Eloin meire Shechem. We also agree that Eloin meire is Shechem, but we have a Gzeira Shava. Only manduim Gzeira Shava. Atem b'malimatem. How did you know? We have a Gzeira Shava to teach you Eloin meire is Shechem. But you don't have a Gzeira Shava, so why are you living here? What basis do you believe that you're living on the real mountain that Yeshua came into Eretz Yisrael? So he proved to them that you must have tradition of Torah Shabbal Peh. Finally, the Gemara says, but that's not everybody agrees with that. So this is true, by the way. You can go with an army. Certain types of tours will take you to Har Abel. And like I mentioned before, that they're on top of the mountain, there is a leftover mizbeach. They say it's from the time of Yahushua. They don't know, but here we're going to learn another opinion that wrong. That there's a little hill next to right when you cross the Jordan. That's called Har Grizim and Har Abel. Another opinion. Rabbi Lezer says he learns that it's across the Jordan, but right when you cross the Jordan, you'll bump into Har Grizim and Har Abel. If you think you have to go further into Israel, like Siv, the pasuk says, when you cross the Jordan River, you'll find it. So ba'avrachem means it's right there when you cross the river. Achrei derech mevoya shemesh. So how do you learn pshat that it's to the east? Mokom shecham shekas. Mevoya shemesh means far away from where the sun sets. So meaning that it's more to the east. So according to him, mevoya shemesh means it's further away from where the sun sets. So it's more east. Now the problem is Eretz Knani, it's Eretz Achivihi. Eretz Knani means that the Chivi live there. There's another one of the 7 nations that live there, and they live there around Shechem. Hayoshe ba'arava. This is a problem because the Torah describes that Har Grizim is near flat lands. Well, but across the Jordan, when you enter Israel, you're encountering mountains and hills. Isn't there mountains and hills there? And Mul HaGilgal, the Torah tells you that it's near Gilgal. But it doesn't. You can't see Gilgal from there. It's so far away from Gilgal because the way Rabbi Loza yearns, it's right when you cross the Jordan. There it is. So he has a problem with himself on how to understand the pasuk. But Rabbi Loza ben Yankov, Rabbi Loza ben Yankov says that he'll answer that you could learn that it's the Har Grizim and Har Abel are right when you cross the Jordan. The Torah is just giving you some ideas of how to travel in Israel when you're going to capture the land. The Torah is not talking about giving you coordinates where Har Grizim and Har Abel is. The Torah is just telling you, derech, when you go through the land of Israel, but derech lechu, go on main highways, don't go through fields and vineyards. Just be confident and attack by going the main roads. Go where the people are living. Don't go through deserts. Ba'arava, go with his flat lands. Ba'arava, go with his flat lands. Not with mountains. So the pasuk is not just telling you the coordinates, but the Torah is telling you that since Moshe Rabbeinu died and they didn't have a real Amud Onan to lead them, the Torah is just telling you how to go and traverse the land of Israel as they begin their the campaign to take over the 7 nations. But again, there's a machlokes in the Gemara of where Har Grizim and Har Evel were.